Today, I'm delighted to welcome Senior Brand Marketing Specialist Mays Elansari. With a background in agencies, experience in overseas markets, and having previously managed big brands including Subway and Penhaligon's, Mays joins me to discuss the role of long-term brand building in modern marketing. Welcome, Mays.
Hi.
Hi. Really good that you're on here, and thanks very much for coming along.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No, not at all. It's superb. I mean, you're somebody with an extremely varied background.
Yeah.
And what we always do with these things is we invite our guests just to go through their background, where they've come from, their experiences, and so on. So I wonder if you could just explain to the audience sort of what your background is.
Sure.
And the various roles you've had.
Prefer. So I started off agency side, which was amazing. I was at McCann Erickson for around 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Was really very lucky to have worked on some amazing global multinational brands, from Reckitt Benckiser to Johnson & Johnson, MasterCard, and Tiffany & Co. So a great variety of kind of different sectors and industries. But I think the biggest thing that was really exciting about that journey and experience was being able to understand and pivot and really dig under the kind of skin and business side of the brands. And it was always an integrated approach.
Yep.
So that's been a great journey to kind of be able to leverage that insight into creativity, into the business world, into different sectors and across channels. So that was a phenomenal journey. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
I then pivoted and kind of got pulled onto the other side, as they say, and went client side, working with one of the largest franchise organizations in the Middle East called Al Shaya. And what was really such a great opportunity was building the brands and department from scratch.
Okay.
And that's where I kind of really got into food. It was very exciting, and worked across some very big global brands like Pinkberry, which is frozen yogurt, to Duna and DeLuca, which is a purveyors of fine food, as you know, both retail and cafe. And then working with Chef Thomas Keller, who combined has 7 Michelin stars, and opened his Bouchon bakery in the Middle East and kind of expanded across the region. And then came back to London, back home, and worked at Penhaligon's, so a beautiful luxury high-end fragrance company. And then my last 10 year was at Subway, running the UK and Ireland, and then moved on to marketing director for EMEA.
I mean, that's a very, that's a really varied set of experiences there. And also as well of clients.
Yeah.
So when you look back and you think about all that time, and as you say, so different sectors, different clients, different priorities and so forth. What would you say were the common themes and challenges that came across, particularly when it came to brand building, but just really in general?
Right. I think if I was to use brand building as an entry point, I think that was one of the biggest, and probably still is to some certain extent. I think it's constantly the justification and the rationale and the validity of why is it so important, and then the hows and the whys as you kind of continue.
Yeah.
But I think I would definitely take the opportunity to constantly share and bring the stakeholders on board. I think when you're able to convince, not just influence, but really kind of take them through the rationale, it makes the kind of ambition and the collective purpose much easier to bring everyone on board. So I think stakeholder management is really important, kind of making sure that there is the substance behind the brand building and not just seen as something that's a nice to have, the importance and understanding. And, I'm sure the rationale behind not just creating short-term creativity or campaigns. That is very performance-led, and I would argue that that's great for the now, but doesn't really help you with the long-term thinking.
Yeah.
So finding the balance, and Mark Ritson talks a lot about, actually the pivotal or the key word is the word and. It's the short and the long term, and they're both work hand in hand. And I think a lot of times businesses forget the long term and focus just on immediacy and the return on investment or sales. That's very short term thinking. And as a marketeer that builds brands, and wants to think with a kind of customer lens, it's very difficult to just focus on the now rather than building the future and the foundation for long term strategy thinking.
Well, I mean, you've actually sort of, in some ways, you preempted the next question, but actually, I think there's a lot more to go down into that, which is exactly that point about persuading companies that often will have a short-term focus, sort of the need to invest in a long-term brand strategy. I'm sure many people who listen to this, they'll have exactly the same sort of challenge, sort of when it comes to that. So, I mean, what did you find was the most successful sort of in persuading those management teams, look, don't just go for the short term, we need to look at the long term as well?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's come from data. And I think a lot of that also comes with test and trial. So taking the data to say, right, how can we look at the kind of lifetime kind of cycle and value of our customers? What does that long-term growth look like? And then, another thing that we talk a lot about is kind of success breeds success.
Yeah.
So using that trial and error, and you can start small and build your case. And I think it just depends on what that C-suite, what their motivators are, and you have to kind of adapt. I don't think one size fits all in strategy, in marketing, let alone in influencing and stakeholder management. And I think it's about recognizing and having a high EQ to understand what matters for your CEO or your COO, and then being able to pivot and carve that narrative. So using data, I think, is really important. I think trial and error, and learning from that. And then also, as I said, the communication and taking them on that journey has been really successful. And I think you need to have a combination of all of them and dial them up and down when necessary. And
I think also as well, I mean, it feels as though just running through a lot of that is the element of trust.
Yeah.
There needs to be trust built 100%. On both sides.
100%. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think trust and communication is really important. So I think that transparency kind of foster and kind of continues with trust. But I think also time. I mean, hopefully as a C-suite kind of senior professional, you're brought in for your expertise.
Yeah.
So I think that always helps. And then building trust, because trust takes time.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes hard for, CEOs to kind of really put a lot of trust in. And so therefore that faith has to also come from, well, we've hired this individual, so therefore they have the expertise.
Yeah.
The trust hopefully, is also earned, but marketeers don't tend to have a lot of time.
And also as well, I mean, CEOs.
Of course.
They don't necessarily.
100%, which is why the short term tends to be everyone's priority. Because whether their tenure is a couple of years or not, the results kind of tend to speak for themselves. And so therefore, the impact is pulling, and therefore, you need to have very immediate kind of results.
On that, I know I can see that would necessarily be the case. Now, I know when we talked before, one of the things that we've talked about is this whole idea of authentic storytelling, both from an internal and an external standpoint.
Right.
And from my side, I think that's a very important concept. So can you just go a little bit more into that, what it involves, and sort of how you then see the effects of that?
Of course. I think, looking both internally and externally, I would definitely say starting internally is really important. I think looking at kind of communicating and having a shared common goal is really important. And it enables the team to kind of get together and rally to not only make sure that the brand values are kind of lived and breathed internally, but then that way there's a common thread. So whatever touch point, whether it's ops or sales or marketing or the customer team, everyone is aligned on the purpose and the vision and the mission of what the communication should be. And so therefore it makes it much more easier. So when you're looking externally and you're promoting and strategizing on creativity or campaigns with consumers, there's an alignment, right? And there's not a push-pull kind of tension between them. And the impact becomes much easier because then when you bring everyone on the journey, it's, again, a shared common journey that everyone's working towards.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as you say, that common shared experience has to be something, and it all, in a way, sort of comes back to this point about trust and...
Exactly. And authenticity, to your point. So again, it's a shared goal. So therefore, you're authentically bringing internal stakeholders together and that they feel they're part of something bigger. And then when you're communicating it to your consumers, there's an authentic thread that this is what our values are and this is how we want to make you feel. And so therefore, this really communicates the brand proposition.
Well, also as well, it's like with anything in life. I mean, if something feels forced, it doesn't feel natural.
Exactly.
Yeah, the opposite. When it feels natural, I mean, people are a lot more sort of receptive to it and so forth.
Exactly. And a lot of consumers are gravitating to authentic brands that have a transparent, right, and a very clear strategy on whether it's purpose-driven, whether it's functionality, whether it's a kind of emotional storytelling. Consumers are much more savvier, right, and much more interested in, understanding the brand's responsibilities and, how they kind of communicate with, their wider audience.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, as you said, I mean, it all makes perfect sense. Let's drill down into a little bit more detail when it comes sort of for that whole persuading a board about the importance of a long-term strategy when it comes to brand. And again, this is something that we discussed before about Penhaligons, sort of how you explain to them sort of what you need to do. Could you just walk through in terms of, for the audience?
Of course.
Sort of what were the steps you took?
Of course. I think the great thing about Penhaligons is it's such a beautiful old heritage brand. The presence in store is, really fundamental to the category, to the brand, to the experience and working with our audiences. And I think it's been crucial in building that relationship and the customer experience in store. So fundamentally, it was really finding a way of how can we reach out to new audiences? And part of that is always growth. And so we looked to innovation to help us, because how can you have something that's very sensory in store and bring that to life when you're going online? So it was really trying to say, how can we replicate the in-store experience and bring that and bridge it to the online world? And that was a fascinating challenge to really kind of take something that's quite sensory, that is really evokes a lot of emotions of smelling and sense of the perfumes in store. And so we really worked with innovation to kind of find a more digital approach to take the software to say, right, how can we engage with consumers and start appealing to new audiences through an acquisition strategy, if that makes sense? So I think when you wrap it around with, again, the strategy and thinking this is part of the pillars of where the company wants to grow and acquire new audiences and being able to go on across multi-channels and multidisciplinary. And so really fleshing out on the e-com side of the business and working collaboratively with them. I think it was a multi-departmental approach to be able to go back to the C-suite and say, right, we need to expand and look at new segments and new audiences, but also be available across different channels. And so that was a great way to kind of pitch to them and really work internally to find the software and the back end in order to expand our reach online. And that's exactly what we did, which was create a software and a program which basically audited and profiled that audience through several questions to say, what are you looking for? What occasion is the fragrance for? What type of personality do you relate to? And that software, using AI, enabled us to kind of whittle down and provide a recommendation to that person, to the audience. And through that, we were able to then do a sampling process and then bring them back into the store so they could then scent and smell the fragrance that we had recommended through an online sampling process that would then arrive home, and that would then bring them in store to then continue that customer journey and experience to really create a personalized approach.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating example of how you would do it. And again, how you bring the board sort of the board on board.
Right. Exactly.
Where you sort of with the whole process.
Exactly.
You've worked on.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot of campaigns.
Yes. Just a few.
Yeah, just a few over the years. Yeah. I mean, when you look at those campaigns, what was it? I mean, and I have no doubt that sort of, virtually all of them were successful. But what was the ones that you would highlight in terms of for you that sort of really stand out?
For sure.
And I guess in a way also as well, what were sort of some of the themes that you thought sort of run through those campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, one I'd say that comes to mind, and I think the reason it comes to mind from a success factor, I would say that it was genuinely fun.
Right. Okay.
And I think again, internally and externally, I mean, it was extremely challenging from a timing perspective, from stakeholders, and it was a very elaborate and integrated campaign. It was called, it's funny, and even the name itself is making me chuckle. It's called the Tiger Pig campaign.
Right, okay.
I know, and let me explain. I'll give a bit of context, but so this was, I think, 21. So Christmas 21, we have, 22. We had a festive campaign, and it was our Tiger Pig product at Subway.
Yeah.
It was we brought it back by popular demand, which was our take on pigs in blanket.
Yeah.
And the reason why we called it Tiger Pig is the bread is a tiger bread.
Yeah.
And then obviously the pigs in blanket inside. Beautiful, it was a crispy, mapley bacon sandwich sub that was part of our festive campaign. And having come out of the pandemic, we really wanted to just bring friends and family together to have a good time.
Yeah.
Really that, then of course, we wanted to launch our festive campaign in our menu, which was a great way to kind of bring that together. But the ambition, and to your point, the success around the campaign was just that, was to have that emotional context and relationship with our consumers coming out of quite a difficult time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what better way than Christmas time and the holidays where everyone gets together. And therefore that insight was so powerful. It made everything else much more easier to think about, right, from a creative perspective. How could we do that? It's not just a, run-of-the-mill advertising campaign. We really took the integrated approach to say, who are our customers? What are we trying to do? What do we want them to make them feel and do? And came the idea of creating a TikTok dance challenge, which we did. And that was the core of the idea, which we then worked with all our partners and agencies to say, right, if this is what we want to do, how can we bring this to life? Everything from traditional media all the way through to digital and activation out of home. That culminated in a 6 to 7 week a digital campaign where we worked with diversity group, both Nathan Ramsey and Warren Russell, who generated a one-of-a-kind dance move for us. We filmed all the back kind of making of backstage and behind the scenes, generated fully 3D animated characters of a tiger and a pig, who then replicated both Nathan and Warren. And launched that as part of our campaign, and then took that and almost kind of reskinned the kind of dance revolution. I don't know if you know that. It's kind of like a Just Dance digital motion where you have to follow the moves and you get points.
Oh, okay.
And we did an interactive activation basically across the whole of the UK within malls, and gathered, passersby who could come with their friends and do the challenge. So someone would be the tiger, the other would be the pig, and we had a leaderboard. And then we would do sampling, for example, of our products, and then had an app that they could scan to then discover more of the festive menu and go in stores. We even created tiger pig socks. I don't have any with me, but I can get maybe a pair for you.
Yeah, why not?
But yeah, so it was just kind of the feel-good factor, the fun factor. It was the kind of engagement. We launched it obviously on TikTok and all other digital channels. We had a huge outdoor campaign. So that to me was very much part of the brand building, wrapped obviously on a huge kind of big moment.
Yeah.
From a seasonality perspective, underrooted by a great product that, we knew did really well within this occasion. And, we were very lucky that we were able to win an award with the Drum for the best augmented reality out-of-home campaign.
Yeah. No, and as you say, I mean, it just shows that you really need all platforms.
100%.
Yeah, in order to get your message across.
Yeah, and it was, again, to your point, I guess about the messaging, the purity of it. And I think what was great is that we were able to bring it alive. And I think that's what you could do with out of home. And that's what you could do with digital out of home. But more importantly, when you want engagement, you have to kind of show up.
Yeah.
You have to be there. So there's the advertising where you're pushing, but when you want to pull in your consumers, and you want to resonate emotionally on a different level, the fun part is bringing people together.
Yeah.
And so then that's where I think that kind of sweet spot kind of comes alive. Whereas, yes, we were obviously trying to sell more Tiger Pig subs, which we did successfully, which is great because the product was amazing.
Yeah.
So kudos to the MPD team. The creative team were amazing. And again, like I said, so was it with the agencies. But it really came to life because we all brought everyone on the journey with us, from our partners and our suppliers and our, agencies, because it was very challenging. I make it sound very easy, but this was like 5-6 months of the making, literally taking this, dismantling the kind of activation, taking it from mall to mall, and then setting it up again, capturing all the data, capturing the footage, engaging with our franchisees and for them, because we were driving traffic to their stores, which at the end of the day is how you wanted to generate sales. But again, the short term and the long term was, the short term was driving consumers to go in and try our new festive menu, which we rewarded them with our beautiful Tiger, pig socks, and through our loyalty program. But then the long term was emotionally resonated, creative, bold advertising and campaign that we could then build on year.
Yeah. So,
win-win.
Which is exactly. It's fascinating. Now, one thing that's been sort of made me chuckle in a way, but also as well, it's sort of a really good way of sort of bringing about inclusivity.
Yes.
In terms of audiences, is what you did with Veganuary.
Right.
And obviously you have a product that could be argued excludes a certain part of the market. So can you tell us about that? Sort of
Sure.
You sort of aims there, how you positioned it, sort of and where the marketing campaign really fitted in.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Veganuary has always been an interesting moment or a time in the year. What's really unique and I would say powerful about Subway's menu is that we wanted to lean into the fact that, vegans or flexitarians aren't vegans or flexitarians just during January.
Yeah.
It's a way of life. It's a consumer behavior. It's a choice. And so therefore, it was really kind of our responsibility to say, right, let's lean into this a little more and let's actually think about it from a wider perspective, which is, yes, we want to celebrate and highlight our range. But actually what was really strong about it was that a lot of our products are vegan or vegetarian, but it's there throughout the year.
Yeah.
And that's actually a really powerful message, which is we are not just, focusing on a trend or a moment in a campaign or a calendar year, but it was actually celebrating and leaning into a lot of our audiences who might be a small number, but actually, there's a movement about healthier living, right? And looking about your consumption. And I guess giving variety and choice to our consumers to say, whether you're a flexitarian and you wanted to go and try something new, because on the flip side is you don't have to actually give up on the taste.
Yeah.
So you want good value. That's, a vegan option that, has, a bunch of flavor and taste, which is really exciting. And so we did that with Veganuary and we looked at, again, on a holistic approach and created this campaign that actually celebrated the different range and day parts that you can enjoy our Veganuary festive menu throughout. Through an integrated campaign, again, across different multiple touch points. Again, focusing probably a little more on the flexitarians to say, actually, we're here for you.
Yeah.
On the high street, you've got options. And again, it wasn't just a sub. You could have a salad or a wrap. They were a vegan double chocolate cookie, which is delicious to say. I have to say, I've tried many and I can validate how good it tastes, all the way to some of our sides and our snacks. And, what was great was using, again, based on that insight, looking at who our audience were, thinking about that channel and looking at the variety of channels that we could use. And I really enjoyed and loved the aspect of looking at how out of home, specifically programmatic, really helped us. Because if you think about it, when you're consuming your food, there's different day parts and there's different opportunities or moments. And not everyone, unlike me, thinks about food all the time.
Yeah.
And so you wanted to make sure that to say, if we talk about a range of items and menu, that you talk to consumers at different times with different products. And that's exactly what programmatic helped us do, targeting our consumers, promoting our different, menu items at different day parts, and flipping the creative and having that narrative to make sure that we were being, effective and real-time impact on the creative work.
It's quite, important about sort of inclusivity. I mean, we were sort of, we've had this conversation sort of where we were talking about what Uber did. A campaign that really resonated for you was in terms of Uber and their campaign during Ramadan.
Yes.
Sort of, and how you felt that sort of the important message that brought across as well. So, again, because these are things that listeners may not be sort of aware of. Can you just go through that?
Yeah.
And just give a few words as to how you sort of why you felt that was so powerful.
Yeah, I think it was the fact that, again, it resonated with a certain community in a certain time. So you might know, or for the listeners who might not know, Muslims adhere to fasting during the holy month of Ramadan. And I think, finding the role and purpose of the brand and speaking and, really resonating with a group of audience for something that's very special to them, I think is very powerful because it unites both consumers and brands during this great occasion. And what Uber did really resonated with a huge Muslim community who are fasting during this time. But they did it in a very, I think, authentic way, which was celebrating, fasting in Ramadan and the role of what Uber could do and bring to life through their out-of-home campaign was really ingenious way of using digital out-of-home for a lot of, consumers who, either were fasting and adhering to it or who weren't, which was like, this is an extremely clever and creative way of, using digital out-of-home to celebrate fasting and also display and showcase the amount of food and brands that Uber work with to look at, when the consumers or when Muslims were actually going to break their fast. So it was a great kind of creative approach to celebrating an authentic moment for, that audience during a specific time.
Yeah, and something that as well that if you wanted to put it from another angle, also brought in the data side as well.
Yes, exactly.
As well. So no, it's fascinating how that all came together.
Yeah, it was really. I think it was a really important. Moment. For the community, right, to see such a great big global brand really identifying. It wasn't just a campaign per se. They weren't just pushing out. I think they were just saying, "Hey, now it's time to break your fast."
Yeah.
And I think that so simple and so insightful and that kind of moment of truth resonated with a lot on an authentic and in a real way that really kind of just resonates with me as a consumer, as a Muslim, as a practicing Muslim, but also as a marketeer to say that's really powerful that you were able to kind of bring together, again, like I say, the idea with the channel and find a bold and a creative way of bringing that to life.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you say, and for such a huge brand as well.
Yes, exactly.
To do that is fascinating. I mean, we always, it's been fascinating because we run through a number of topics and a number of campaigns and so forth. We always end these interviews with just, what would be the key pieces of advice that you'd give to anyone listening? Yeah, on any of the topics that we've
I'd probably say there were 4 key things if we were keeping them general and big enough. I would say the stakeholder management. I think understanding who your stakeholders are, what motivates them, and making sure that you take them on that journey. I think sometimes the barrier or the friction with marketing and the C-suite is they don't necessarily understand or have the full vision. And so I think with anything, when you bring everyone on board and on the journey with you and you share your successes, so communication is fundamental because then A, they feel part of it, B, they understand where you want to go, and then C, they can see the results. And I think that's really fundamental to understand that marketing really is, not a cost, but it is an investment.
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, you've got to be able to validate and substantiate that. So if that's your goal, then make sure that you're bringing everyone on the journey with you.
Yeah.
So I think stakeholder management is really important in communication. I think the other thing is then understanding your brand and really living and breathing it. So thinking about the strategy, the proposition, your assets. What is, the USP behind it? What are the strengths and values? And then making sure you've got that strategy, but then always putting the lens from the consumer perspective. What is it if they are looking for? Making sure that you put them at the heart of the business and the brand. Because at the end of the day, we're there to promote, of course, the brand, but it won't really resonate if you don't hit a chord or an insight based on, the data that you gather.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing I would say is being bold, right? And being curious from a creative perspective. I think quite a few of the industry leaders are talking about, the age of beige advertising and being, bland. And as marketeers, we talk about humor and emotions and we talk about how you can resonate. And what better way to do it than emotionally engaging with brand building, great creativity.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. Maze, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's been absolutely superb.
Thank you so much for having me. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you, Maze, for the brilliant discussion around the need to rethink brand strategy and the value that brand building can deliver for businesses. If there's anything you would like to ask us or hear more about, you can visit the JCDecaux Marketing Hub online. We hope you enjoyed listening, and wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.